Hello, and welcome back to Adam's Fam Anime. My name is John, and today I'm going to be recapping and reviewing chapter 1024 of One Piece. Now, for this week's chapter, there is no cover page. Rather, we spend the first 4 or 5 pages checking in with the Straw Hats who currently aren't involved in conflicts. So, the first of those Straw Hats that we actually get to see is Usopp, and he appears to be taking credit for Big Mom's Conqueror's Haki knocking out some of the Beast Pirates. And even though that's classic Usopp lying through his teeth, we do have to give him some credence of credit because he is not unconscious. He actually has willpower enough to withstand Big Mom's Conqueror's Haki. What's more, and even more deserving of credit, is the fact that he's using that opportunity to attempt to get more Beast Pirates to join his cause. And the way that things tend to go for Usopp toward the end of arcs, at least post-time skip, I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if most people are just under the assumption, aside from the Straw Hats themselves of course, that Usopp is actually a Conqueror's Haki user. Heck, and even to be quite honest, if one of the Marys catch wind of this and inform CP0, it's entirely possible that Usopp's bounty might shoot through the roof, at least once Wano's all said and done. And in any case, the next couple pages are dedicated to showing us the other Straw Hats and where their progress is, or at least their locations are. But I'm more than okay with the lack of story here when it comes to the Straw Hats, because I feel like Oda is just kind of giving us a feel for what they're doing before he, leaves them for a few chapters coming up. Now, the monster trio is not mentioned at all in this chapter, but at least it's good to know that the other Straw Hats are in communication with each other and may possibly even be joining up here shortly. Now, with those first few handfuls of pages out of the way and those updates with the remaining Straw Hats, we get into the meat of the chapter, which is about Yamato and his relationship with his father. Now, the first few pages are currently dedicated to the fight between Yamato and Kaido, but the dialogue doesn't fail to excite in any case. And I gotta say personally that the more we get to see Kaido speak, the more respect and the more that I like this character as a villain. Now, after we see a move called Vajra Arrow from Kaido, we get a quote from Yamato stating that you've always tried to kill me. And I gotta say that I love Kaido's response when he's like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, this ain't no family squabble. If you wanna wear the name Odin, then you're gonna need to be ready for war. And it's not really a cheeky or a funny quote in any way, shape, or form. It really just kind of shows Kaido's sternness and his utter confidence in himself. And even while fighting Yamato, I think this is a very clever way for Oda to balance a character who is a villain and a father at the same time. And it also kind of gives credence to him being not so much of a brute in the sense that he doesn't hate Odin or dislike Odin, but rather having that name survive or having that name mentioned, especially by the likes of his own son, it needs to be dealt with. So that was a great touch about the halfway point of the chapter, right before we go into the flashback. And the first page of said flashback is of Yamato, and of course Oda starts it off with a bang by giving us 2 big reveals. 1, that Yamato is referred to as the Ogre Princess, and 2, that she is a wielder of Conqueror's Haki. Now, I will address those 2 elephants in the room and what it means in the discussion portion of this video towards the end. But moving on, we see that she's knocked out multiple of Kaido's men, and when he questions her, he does note that it's promising that she has the color of the Supreme King. And we kind of get a repeated line here where Kaido tells Yamato that if you're going to call yourself Odin, then die. So he leaves her chained in some kind of cave prison with 3 powerful samurai, and then he leaves 1 meal between all of them and then leaves some weapons, essentially encouraging them to fight to the death over that singular meal. And when you kind of look at it, this is kind of a smart move on his part, or at least a tactical move where he's hoping that she'll renounce the name of Odin so that way she won't be left in the cave of people who clearly hate him. But she doesn't relent. She still keeps her Odin moniker. However, luckily for her, the 3 samurais she's trapped with are pretty good guys. And it would seem that one of them is apparently Shimosuke Ushimaru, the previous daimyo of the Ringo region, who in the last chapter was referred to as an older version of Zoro, at the very least by Kawamatsu and Boss Hyogoro. And just as well, because this dude seriously gives me Zoro vibes. And in a similar vibe to the Momonosuke, a samurai does not hunger bit, we see Yamato is told that by the 3 samurai she's with who decide to give her the single plate of food. And a quick side note, I would find it incredibly ironic if after she gets out of this cave, because of her hunger, she eats the devil fruit that Kaido has set aside. I, for one, think that'll be a fantastic parallel to Momonosuke considering the amount of parallels that they've had to each other since this whole Wano arc began. Anyways, getting back to the chapter, we get some feel-good dialogue and a really nice touching panel of Yamato eating the food graciously before she asked the name of the man who appears to be Shimosuke Ushimaru. Now, he refers to himself as a fallen samurai and just asks her to refer to him as so-and-so. Now, immediately after that, we see that Yamato reveals to the samurai's surprise that she has Odin's logbook. Now, she says that it's hard to read, but it's unclear if this is a language specific to Wano that the book is written in, or if it's written in the language of the poneglyphs, or if those two are even the same thing. It's not really clear. But what is clear is that someone of the three samurais in there is capable of reading this book, as they spend the next 10 days going over it. And clearly they were able to read it well because they discerned the 20-year prophecy, as so-and-so mentions that they're not the type to wait for the battle in 20 years. And so they decide their way to contribute to that battle is to ensure that Yamato doesn't die in that cave. And it's then that we see that so-and-so, using two-sword style, cuts open the door to this prison known as the Sacred Cave. And Yamato reminds them that if they do, Kaido will kill them, to which they respond that they would never bend the knee to him anyway, so it's better than wasting away in the cave. And so the flashback ends there, and poetically, the first panel that we see in the present is of Yamato stating that she, or he, is not alone. Yamato then questions Kaido about why he would take her or his freedom away, and would take away the freedom of Wano. And interestingly enough, he responds back by saying that life isn't about simple questions and simple answers. And the last page ends beautifully with an amazing panel of them both using Thunder Bagua with Conqueror's coding. And of course, neither club is touching as the Conqueror's haki is preventing it. And the last two panels are dedicated to showing the resolve of Kaido and Yamato respectively while they're using their Conqueror's clad attack. Alright, so that being the end of the chapter, I guess it's time to get into the ratings portion of this video. And as per usual, I'm going to start off with artwork. And for this week's chapter, I'm going to give this artwork a 9. It was a very impressive chapter with some beautifully drawn panels. It just wasn't that wow chapter. The story and the art together did an amazing job in terms of immersion. However, it just really didn't translate to a perfectly drawn chapter from page to page, panel to panel. So I think 9 is pretty fair for this week's chapter. Alright, with artwork out of the way, we can now move on to the story portion of the ratings, in which case I'm going to give this week's story a 9. It was near perfect. The only thing I have gripes with is the fact that we checked in with the Straw Hats just really for no reason at all. We didn't glean any information. We didn't learn anything new. It was just showing us that they're all still moving around and they're all still, in contact with each other, which is fine. However, I felt those few pages could have been dedicated to the flashback and the exploration of the relationship between those three samurai and Yamato, or heck, even the fight between Yamato and Kaido. I would have taken 3 more pages of that as well. So that's my only gripe with the story. It was well drawn, near perfect. It's probably one of the flashbacks I want to see the most be animated. I feel like they spend at least a couple episodes on it that in the anime could easily be a 10. It'll be good for the people who are anime only, and if somehow we get to reveal that this man, so-and-so, is Zoro's father, then the story easily goes to a 10. But for now, the story rating for this week's chapter is a 9. Alright, now moving on to the hype rating for this week's chapter. I think it's going to go ahead and wrap up the trifecta of 9s all around. Now, of course, it was an exciting chapter. There was some fighting, there were some flashbacks, there were some tantalizing hints towards characters' willpower, some tantalizing hints towards characters' lineages, and generally I did enjoy reading the chapter. It was fun, but I just feel like in the beginning of the chapter, things really didn't seem super hype. I mean, with the Usopp thing, it was funny, and I'm sure it'll translate well to anime. And the Usopp thing really didn't take away from the hype because we can see that clearly he's not being knocked out by Conqueror's haki. So his bit didn't really feel like wasted pages, but the rest of the Straw Hats and their brief appearances in this chapter do seem to take away from the overall narrative of what's going on. And as I said in the prior rating, that I felt like those pages could have been dedicated to giving us more of the Kaido and Yamato fight, or even conversation, or more of the relationship building over the 10 days that took place in that flashback. So in regards to this week's chapter's hype, still amazing chapter, amazing hype. I just feel like that there's some stuff that Oda could have done with those pages to make this chapter a bit more fluent and more exciting. Alright, now for those of you who are mathematically challenged, that means that the overall rating for this week's chapter is going to be a 9. It was an amazing chapter, and it does leave us with some things to discuss and some things to look forward to. The first of which is the buff to the weakling trio. We see that Usopp is no pushover, and that in fact he can stand up to Big Mom's Conqueror's Haki at the very least. So I think it's good for Otis to establish that for us. That was pretty nice. I did enjoy that. Now, the next thing I want to address is the fact that Yamato is referred to as the Ogre Princess. And so it seems to me that it's pretty much confirmed now that Kaido and Yamato, by extension, his own daughter or son, are ogres. And potentially important ogres, as in maybe direct descendants of the royal line of ogres. And the fact that later in the chapter, Kaido says that it's not as simple as things seem, it's making me think that we're about to get the full backstory for Kaido and his reasoning for choosing Wano in particular. My best guess is that they are fighting on top of the skull of one of their ancestors, who is probably a royal ogre. And if that is the case, then Kaido could be claiming something that he thinks is his, which is somewhat reasonable, I guess. But with regard to the people of Wano and his ability or his desire to take away their will in the matter, it isn't as simple as it seems, which is agreeable to what he said earlier in the chapter. And again, I have to note that the more Kaido talks and the more he reveals things that he wants or needs to do, the less a-hole-ish he seems about doing things like dropping Onigashima on the Flower Capital. So ultimately, I can't wait to hear more from Kaido and get the official full story of what his plan is. And with Yamato having Conqueror's Haki, that's another thing that we need to discuss. Does this mean that Conqueror's Haki is something that can be passed down through lineages? Now, we heard back in the Paramount War, Garp mentioned that he thought Luffy might have been born with Conqueror's Haki. Now, unless he was born knocking out nurses, it seems to be implied that there's a bloodline thing to it. Now, Garp never mentions, or at least we have no confirmation that Garp uses Conqueror's Haki. We do know, at least from Ivankov, that Dragon is a user of Conqueror's Haki. Now, with the exception of a baby who might potentially be Shanks' kid, we don't really anticipate or look forward to many births coming up anytime soon. But I think that would potentially provide some narrative to really fill in the backstory of the One Piece world and the people who exist within it. Anyways, moving on, when it comes to the character of so-and-so, aka potentially Shimotsuki Ushimaru, I just can't help but think that this character is related to Zoro in some way, shape, or form. And if he is the daimyo of the Ringo region, it's possible that he himself also has Conqueror's Haki. Now, me personally, I get the feeling that this character might be Zoro's father, because if Yamato is around 8 or so at this time, at least of the flashback, that would mean that Zoro had just been born. So given the fact that Zoro's been tied to Ryuma and now referred to as being similar to the Shimotsuki, it's very possible that we might finally get this backstory for Zoro. I mean, personally, I'd hope that this flashback is continued at some point. I mean, maybe we get the reveal that he sent his son off to the East Blue or something to that effect. I mean, maybe it is just wishful thinking, but Yamato hasn't come across Zoro yet, so I think that will be an interesting meeting if and when it does occur. In any case, that's the end of this video. That's the end of my review and my rating. I hope you guys liked it. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Also, if you guys have some comments or questions or anything you want to discuss, drop it down in the comment section down below. Anyways, I'm John from Adam's Fam Anime, and I will catch you guys in the next video.